Now I'm going to talk about movement in the expert theory. My name is Pipiti Jatmoko from Sanata Dharma University, Yogyakarta. Now let's start with the concept of movement. What is movement? First, movement is a syntactic process which is needed to form a morphologically and syntactically acceptable sentence. So here we have two reasons for movement, two kinds of reason. The first is a morphological reason and the second is a syntactic reason. What is the morphological reason? Well, in English, every sentence has a tense indicator, and a tense indicator is usually indicated by an inflection. And an inflection is a bound morpheme. It cannot stand by itself, and therefore it needs a verb to be attached to. So the morphological reason is that because we have a bound morpheme in English, an inflection, which cannot stand by itself, and it needs a verb to be attached to. And then we also have a syntactic reason for movement. The first is that every sentence should have a subject, and the subject of a sentence in English should be before the predicate. So a subject should appear in the beginning of a sentence before the predicate, like John goes, I will, they have, and so on. The next syntactic reason is that English requires an inversion to form a question. We have, did you answer the question? Will you come here? Or can you help me? So we have a modal or an auxiliary verb before the subject to form a question. The next, still a syntactic reason, a WH phrase should be placed before an inverted predicate. So if we have what or when or how in a question, then the question word should be placed before the modal or the auxiliary verb, which is moved to the position before the subject. Now let's see the movements in English sentences. We'll start with the sentence Jenny bought a necklace. The sentence is a complementizer phrase. This is the D structure of the sentence Jenny bought a necklace, and the S structure is produced with two movements. The first movement is the movement of Jenny over here. Jenny is produced as a specifier of V, and it moves to the specifier of T here, the NP over here. This is the position of the subject. So Jenny moves to this position, and it leaves a trace T over here. So any moved element leaves a trace, and the trace is co-index. So Jenny has an index of 1, and here the trace T has an index of 1. And then the second movement is the movement of Bai over here. Bai is the head of the VP, Jenny buy a necklace. And then Bai here moves to ED because ED is an inflection and it cannot stand by itself. And therefore, Bai moves to this position and merges with ED, forming bought. So let's see over here, we have an NP movement from the specifier of V to the specifier of T. And then we have the V movement here, the head V here moves from this position, the V movement, to the T movement because we have ED over here and ED is defective, it's an inflection, it cannot stand by itself and therefore Bai moves to this position and matches with ED and form bought. Let's move to the next sentence. We have, can you answer the question? This is a CP, or complementizer phrase. And this is the D structure of the question. Can you answer the question? We have can here as the head of T, and then we have C, which is empty over here. The specifier of T here is also empty. And then here, this is the VP. U is the specifier of answer over here, and the question here is the complement of answer. So once again, this is the D structure. The S structure is formed with two movements. The first is the movement of U over here. It's from the specifier of V. It moves to the specifier of T. This is the subject position, because of the requirement that every sentence should have a subject. And then the second is the movement of can over here. So can here is produced in the T position as the head of TP. And because this is a question, then can here has to move to this position. And we have, can you answer the question? Can you answer the question? Let's see the types of movement we have over here. The first, we have an NP over here, the NPU over here, which is produced as a U here, which is produced as a specifier of V. Then it moves to the specifier of T because every sentence should have a subject. And then the second, we have the movement of can over here from the T position to the C position because of the requirement that in a verbal question, we need to have an inversion. So the inversion is can here is placed before the subject U. Now let's move to the next question. We have movement. Is it difficult? This sentence is a question, and this is the structure of the sentence. Is it difficult? We have C over here, it takes TP, and the specifier is empty. This is always empty, but this is the position of the subject. We have ES over here. This is the tense indicator. And ES here takes a VP because ES is defective, and therefore it takes a VP with B as the head. And B here takes an AP. It takes an adjective phrase as a complement. It's difficult, like the test difficult. So it here is produced as a specifier of difficult. This is the D structure of the question. Is it difficult? Is the test difficult? Once again, it here is produced as the specifier of difficult. The S structure is produced with two movements. The first is the movement of it over here. From the specifier of the adjective difficult, it moves to this position. It be difficult. And then from this position, it moves to the subject position over here. It, ES over here, and be difficult. So from the specifier of A, it moves first to this position, and then it moves to the specifier of T. So the movement of the NP, it here is cyclic. It does not go directly to the specifier of T over here, but it moves to this position first. It be difficult. Is there any proof that B can take a specifier in the S structure? Well, we have a sentence like, I urge that the test be easy. I urge, I required that the test be easy or that the test be difficult. So we can have B and then with a specifier, I urge that the test be easy, as a proof that P can have a specifier in the S structure. So the movement over here is not a direct movement, but it's cyclic. And then the next movement is the movement of B over here. B is needed to move to this position because ES is defective here. So B will move to this position and merges with ES, forming S. And then the next, from this position, is still needs to move because this is a question, and therefore the is over here should be placed before the subject. And then an inversion is needed. We have, is it difficult? So we can say this is the S structure of the sentence, is it difficult? We have here, so this is the movement. First we have the movement of NP from the specifier of T, and then it moves cyclically to the specifier of V first, and then finally it moves to the specifier of T. And then we have the movement of B over here. It moves to this position first, forming S, merging with ES, and then it moves to this position because of the requirement that every question should have an inversion, and the inversion is here. Is it difficult? The next we have the question, what will we eat for dinner? This is a CP. And then the CP here has C empty over here, empty C, and also empty specifier. And then C here takes a TP as its complement, and will here is the head of TP, and here will take a VP as its complement. And we can say that this is the D structure of the question, what will you eat for dinner? The D structure is formed by three movements. The first is the movement of V over here. V is produced as a specifier of the V over here. It moves to the specifier of T because of the syntactic requirement that every sentence should have a subject over here. And this is the position of the subject. V moves to this position, leaving a trace T1 over here. And then the next, we have the movement of will over here from the T position to the C position. So in the C position here is always empty. And then, but this is the landing side of an auxiliary verb or a model in a question. So will moves from T over here to the C position over here. And then we have another movement, namely the movement of what over here. What is produced as the complement of it over here within the VP, and then it moves to the empty position over here. So this is the WH phrase position. What will we eat for dinner? So here we have the first, an NP movement. NP moves from the specified position of V to the empty T position, to the empty specifier of T here, which is always empty. And then we have the movement of will over here from T here to C over here, which is always empty as well. And then we have the movement of WH phrase from wherever it is, but in this case it's from the complement of V. It moves to the specifier of C, which is always empty. But this position is the position of a WH phrase in a question. So this is the S structure of the sentence, what will we eat for dinner? So from the discussion, we can say that there are two types of movement. The first is the head-to-head movement. So a head moves to a head position. The first is V to T. This movement occurs because the T is defective, because the T is inflection, and V here moves to T and merges with T here, so that T, which is ES or ED, can occur in a sentence. And that's a morphological reason. And then we have another head-to-head movement, namely the movement of T to C. This movement is because of a syntactic reason, namely that a question should have an inversion. So the T over here, will or can or a model or do or does, move to the C position because of the syntactic reason, namely that a sentence should have an inversion, a question should have an inversion. And then the second type of movement is a maximal projection. This is an XP to an XP, the position of a maximal projection to another position of a maximal projection. Here we have NP, which moves from the specifier of V to the specifier of T because of a subject requirement that every sentence in English should have a subject. And then we have a WHP, which moves to the specifier of C because of the requirement that a WHP should be placed in the beginning of a sentence or before the modal auxiliary verb or before the inverted subject. And the position before the inverted subject is the specifier of C. We have more examples here. The first, we have John finished the test at 10 o'clock. Here we have the S structure of John finished the test at 10 o'clock. So John here moves from the T1 here to the specifier of TP over here. This is the specifier of V, and then it moves to the specifier of T. And then finish here moves from the T position over here and the T2 here. This is the position of V. It moves to the T position over here and it merges with ED over here. And then we have the second example. What will you write in the letter? Here this is the S structure. He over here is produced as a specifier of V over here. This is a specifier of right, and then it moves to this position from the specifier of right to the specifier of T. And then we have will over here, which is produced at the T position, and it moves because of the requirement that there must be an inversion between the subject and a predicate in a question. And then the last here is the movement of what over here from the complement of right, from this position right over here. This is trace 3. It moves to the specifier of Z over here. Well, that's all about the movement in English. Thank you very much. In my next presentation, I will talk about non-overt categories. Thank you.